This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
You know, I spoke about my dad gardening, putting 9 or 10 rose bushes on the front of his house. Another person that gardens and has some great products. It's our friend Tom Murphy who now joins us. Tom, what is happening right now in the Murphy garden? What's starting to bloom? What's starting to get used in the household a little bit?
Well, we would in a normal year. We're not gardening this year. It looks like we're going to downsize, but normal year, potatoes and onions will be coming along great. We'd be digging them up in a couple months, and then it's always the gamble on when you put your tomatoes in. And I probably would have already planted them in tomatoes and peppers. I would have probably already put in, and then a couple of years we've had frost wipe them out, but. Who knows? There's typically going to be one more frozen day between now and May.
It's always the risk. It's always, do I go ahead? Do I not do it? Do I do it? No, I hear what you're saying there. So, well, Tom, we're going to get the finish to spring football on Saturday. Let's start there, and then we'll get to the Arkansas-Tennessee series that on a lot of people's minds. As go and get a really good look, I presume, at this defense and kind of what a new look, new coordinator, new staff defense is going to be like. What are you expecting based on what you've seen in the 4 or 5 practices the media have been allowed to watch?
Right. Well, I would say Sam Pittman describes new defensive coordinator Travis Williams' schemes as very aggressive. Will they show every blitz they have? I doubt that, but I'm sure they'll show some blitzing. It has caused a problem for the offensive tackles. They've shuffled some dudes around to try to get better protection. What we saw in the work this week so far, K.J. Jefferson and the other quarterbacks completed some passes. And I'm talking about in, 3-on-2 coverage drill stuff and then also in team. But I think what they believe is that their cornerbacks are going to hold up better. And so they can afford to leave them on islands and come after quarterbacks with, different packages, different twists and stuff. And we'll be able to affect the quarterback. I mean, after you sack the quarterback 42 times in a year, school record, you feel like maybe you can do that again. Well, they don't have Drew Sanders, but I do think Pooh Paul and a combination of other guys are going to allow them, and the defensive ends are going to allow them to get after quarterbacks some. And if their corners can hold up, then maybe they get off the field more than they did last year when they led the country in passing yards allowed per game.
Yeah, because the scheme and the coverage will probably determine how much pressure you can get. And we talk about sack numbers, and we've looked back at what some of the best performances have been in the last 10 years or so, and hadn't really had anyone that lived up to Beckett's numbers. But that's going to, if you had someone that got double-digit sacks on the year, it's probably going to have a lot to do with how the secondary performs.
Absolutely, and I think Landon Jackson might be the leading candidate to try to reach 10. I guess Drew Sanders almost got there, and Jordan Dominic was close too, but both those guys are gone. So I think Landon Jackson, Zach Williams, I'm not sure anybody's going to get the playing time where they're in on every third down, basically. But I do believe Landon Jackson will be in a lot of third downs, and then we'll see among the newcomers. Trajan Jeffcoat is having a very good spring. I think he's rejuvenated after his playing time diminished some. We're talking about a kid who was an all-SEC caliber defensive end at Missouri, and so I think he's going to get his opportunities as well. And then, you got Jashad Stewart, who's a, solid program kid who does what the coaches like, and he looks like he might be a starter. So they're going to have a really solid rotation at the end.
So on that subject, Tom, you mentioned a couple different position groups. If you were to go out on a limb on April the 13th, what position group do you think is going to be the strongest on the defensive side of the football?
Well, based on what we've seen in this spring, I think the DNs that I was just talking about, but a close second could be the linebackers. I just think that Pooh Paul is really going to be a leading tackler type guy, team leader, and he seems to be pretty instinctive. And we saw a few cases last year where he got the blitz and he got to the quarterback some. I know he forced a fumble in one of the games.
South Carolina, yep.
Maybe, late in the game. And then the cornerbacks. Does Ladarius Bishop get healthy enough and confident enough to really help them? Because if he does, you're looking at Dwight McLaughlin, Snacks Johnson, Bishop. You're looking at Quincy McAdoo, who was a breakout star last year. And then Jaheim Singletary, who's the transfer from Georgia. There's 5 corners. Is one of them physical enough to try at safety, to try at nickel where they seem to have some depth issues? Maybe so. But if you got 5 cornerbacks, you're in a pretty good starting position.
You mentioned Chris Paul. I love watching that kid last year. He's a coach's son. I wonder the added value that you've seen over the years, Tom, when you have a particular player whose father has a background in coaching, not just in football, but what addition is that for Chris maybe to expedite his playing time and maturation at Arkansas?
Well, it's really big. And you can see from the first time we talked to him that he's one of those kids who's used to, kind of being in the spotlight, used to having that team leadership mantle on him, is comfortable with it. I think his dad has coached him up very well in that regard. Just a program kid who, he says the things the coaches like to hear. I'm sure he's great in the locker room. That's all we've heard about what he brings. And it's going to be much needed for this team. When you think of who they've lost at that position the last 2 years, Morgan, Hayden Henry, Bumper Pool, Drew Sanders, Pool's position and status and voice on that team is going to be huge because he's got to bring along Jordan Crook. The transfer linebacker from South Florida, Antonio Greer, bringing him along in the schemes and helping him become a leader too, I think it's going to be important for this team.
Before we move to baseball, I want to ask you about special teams because I know Coach Pittman laid out they want to kick, 9 field goals, I think it is, he said was in the format. And I don't know how much time they've spent and how much we've seen in practice to this point, but, Cam Little's back. You got Max Fletcher. What do you think will be on display Saturday when it comes to special teams that we've seen in the last few years have swung some games and determined the winners?
Yeah, they've gotten better. I want to say Sam Pittman's first year, they were not very good. There was a couple of games where they were actually quite detrimental. But I think their return game, when you think about Satania and Bryce Stevens, I think you're in pretty good shape there. I think Cam Little, obviously, with his career field goal percentage over 80, will have a chance to go down as one of the best. You're talking about Kendall Traynor and Zach Hawker and guys like that who've, been around, Alex Tejada who last. And if he'd made that 40-yarder against A&M, which probably would have led to a win, you're talking about, moving on up into like 82, 83% field goal range. But he's a really good one. And then the punting has got to get more consistent. We've actually seen quite a lot of punting in the open media viewings. And, Max Fletcher, he's got a huge leg. What he's got to get better at is in the open range field goals, just getting real good distance and hang time. And then in the precision punting, when, you're punting from the opponent 45 or right at midfield, not landing it at the 18 or the 20, which happened a lot last year. We're talking about landing it at the 5. And so he's got to get better at that precision punting.
Yeah. Tom, maybe as interesting as the baseball that will be played at Baum-Walker is Tony Vitello coming back. And I think for some fans, they just soon have an Oklahoma drill between Dave and Tony to start the series out there. What kind of reception do you think he'll get from the fans? Dave's downplayed this turmoil between the two. How do you think Tony will be received when he comes out to bring the lineup card on Friday night?
I'm sure it's going to be a mixture, because Arkansas fans, if you look in your hearts, you have to appreciate the recruiting he did here, the intensity he brought to that. And Arkansas, was a national power throughout his tenure here, and a lot of it, he was the lead recruiter. Mm-hmm. He's an intense guy. He's already, had multiple, incidents, I guess you could call them, at Tennessee. Obviously, the one with Dave that was on the field a couple years ago. I think there's mutual respect between the two. But because of the thought of drama, I think you're going to hear cheers and boos when Tony Vitello was announced. His team is not as dominant, but they have 3 great pitchers who are all probable major league arms. And so Arkansas's hitting's got to get it together this weekend.
And on the subject of Tony V, I think a lot of Arkansas fans hate him now. They don't like him, which is fine. I mean, you typically don't like opposing coaches. But do you think it's in the back of their heads about the potential next head coach at Arkansas and if he's a possible candidate there? Is that floating around Hog fans' minds this weekend, Tom?
Well, since you just mentioned it, maybe there'll be people at the park talking about that. But, yeah, I mean, I think when you reach Dave Van Horn's age and status in the game and all that, you do talk about guys who could be potential successors. I think both guys on staff are being groomed to, at one point, run their own programs. And Tony Vitello obviously has been very successful. He brought a lot of attention, and they poured a lot of money into the facilities at Tennessee. Now, how do you keep that up? For them, they're off to a 5-7 start in the league. They got to get better. But I think as long as he's getting it done at Tennessee, why wouldn't his name be a candidate here?
Yeah.
Tom, last thing for me, Jared Wagner, first game he doesn't play all season. Arkansas doesn't have the same pop in the batting order last night. His status is uncertain, got a hairline fracture in his thumb. To me, that's the story this weekend, not Tony V, Dave Van Horn. What are you thinking about the impact that he may or may not have by potentially not being in the lineup?
Yeah, that's a huge story. That's a big hole in the order if he's not available for him. And here's the thing, do you take the risk at letting him try to rest that thumb maybe all weekend, or do you play him and, it's just how well can he grip the bat? How confident is he? Does it get into his head? I mean, there's all kind of issues that come from it. Now, last night, Dave Van Horn described him as a tough guy. Well, I'm sure he can withstand the pain, but how much pain is there when he swings, and does that impact his swing? Those are questions that can't be answered until he's out there in the batter's box. So they're going to see what he feels like swinging the bat today. You don't want to have him out of your lineup, but you also don't want him to be playing at 75-80% for the rest of the year. So it's a bit of a dilemma. If they were a little bit deeper in the outfield, maybe you say, let's just rest him until it really feels better. But I don't know if they can afford to do that.
Yeah. Any hangover from yesterday's game and 11-4 final, Little Rock wins? You think there's any hangover from that, or is that just flushed and you move on?
Well, I mean, mentally you try to flush it. That's probably the poorest defensive game they've had all year. And yeah, it was only 2 errors, but they were big ones. And in the same inning that Brady Slavens had his error, another ball that was well hit got under his glove. And if he makes either one of those 2 plays, UALR probably does not score in the 3rd inning. And then the 6th inning, when it was 3-3, if Austin Ledbetter just cleanly fields the ball and goes home, they get the force out there, and there's 2 outs now, or it's a potential double play. I mean, So in both the innings, UALR scored 3. It was very close to being 0. And they also had the dive out in left field from Hunter Grimes, who's in there for Wagner. Just an ill-advised dive when if he just plays it for a single, it doesn't go to the wall and an extra run scores. So, and then in the same inning, he has a throw home that's probably going to be in time for an out, and Jason Jones cuts it. Well, he still has time to field it, throw it home, and there might be a play, but he can't get a grip on it. So, I mean, there was multiple plays not made in addition to the errors, and it really led. I know there was only 4 unearned runs out of the 11, but if you make the plays, you're talking about maybe a 4 or 5 run game for UALR.
See, I'm just as concerned about the 4 runs on 6 hits yesterday, and you scored the 3 in the second off the home run, and then what a lot of people would describe as a garbage run in the 9th that gave you your 4th run. The performance at the plate left a lot to be desired as well yesterday, Tom.
Yeah, they were really shut down by the right-hander who came in and threw the final 4 2/3. Now, they made him work. He threw 107 pitches in the final 4 2/3, but they could not get a big hit. They had runners in scoring position quite a bit, and he got them out of it. So, yeah, I would say there are concerns both at the plate and with your pitching staff, because each weekend now it's going to be, what are we going to do with Hagen Smith? You know, they need about 6 or 7 innings out of Hunter Holland on Friday just to start the weekend right. Because if you use both of those guys on Friday, what are you going to get out of Cody Adcock? You know, how many innings are you going to get out of Will McIntyre? There are a lot of questions arise now in the middle and the back of your bullpen.
Get analysis of every play, prop, and point at BetOnline. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to sign up and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your bonus. That's BLEAV. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts.